Hello, my name is Tim Shoebridge. Now the title of today's video is Creating Vocals When You Can't Sing. It's not a very kind title, is it? Maybe it should be something like Creating Vocals When You're Not Particularly Confident About Your Own Voice. There's plenty of people that have got a fantastic singing voice but just don't know it, or they just don't like the sound of their own voice. And there's plenty of people out there with the flip side of that. They think they can sing, they think they sound fantastic, and they don't at all. It's a very, very subjective thing, singing. Now, 99.9% of the music that I write is instrumental, but just once in a while there might be a piece of music that I write where I think maybe a vocal might fit. I just don't know. Let's try it out. Now, I'm not a singer, I'm not a vocalist, I don't like the sound of my own voice at all. So how can I add some vocals to a track in that case? Now, the obvious thing to do is to get someone else to sing it for me. If you're very, very lucky, you'll have a friend or a friend of a friend who's had some experience singing that can help you out, maybe. But otherwise, you're looking at paying someone professionally to sing for you. And I think to get to that point of getting someone else involved, you probably need to be quite confident about the music you've written, the lyrics that you've written, and you're ready to create that that finished, polished end result. But what if you haven't got to that point yet? What if you're just trying to experiment and see what it might sound like? Well, those are the kind of techniques that I'm going to be talking about in this video. A couple of them are going to be software based and a couple of them are going to be hardware based. I'm not going to talk about things I don't know anything about, so I'm going to show you basically the techniques that I've been using over the last few years that I personally know about and use. It won't be an all-encompassing video about all the possibilities that you have. But that's what's coming up in this video. I really do hope you enjoy it. If you have your own experience of adding vocals to tracks that I haven't covered here, then I'd be really interested to hear from you. So please, please, please leave comments in the section below. But that's what's coming up. Some different techniques for adding vocals to your own tracks when you are not actually singing them. Right, so we're going to start off with some sample libraries. I'm going to show you very, very briefly 3 separate sample libraries. And the reason I'm showing you 3 is because they all work in kind of the same way. In fact, pretty much 99% of all sort of vocal sample libraries out there will work in the same way as these 3. So that's why I'm showing them to you. Now, I think that in terms of getting vocals into sample libraries, we've probably got to thank orchestral sample libraries for giving us the first vocals, the first choir sample libraries. Those were the first ways that we could get vocals into our songs is with the choir. So it's a very, very specific genre for a very specific kind of sound. But let me just show you this one here. It's called Voxos. It's by Synthesized. Now, each of these sample libraries is going to work in one of 2 fundamental ways. The first way is the simplest way. It's just going to create a constant sort of like vowel sound or tone, like an oo or an r or an e or something like that, and then you can just play it across the keyboard, either in legato style or by playing chords and getting kind of pad sounds out of it. And we're all used to that kind of sound, this kind of thing. So very, very specific, a very specific genre, a very specific kind of sound, but there's no words there. There's no lyrics. It's just an ooh. So I mean, good for figuring out some kind of melody, but it's really that's all it's really good for, or some kind of sort of background atmospheric kind of sound that's going on there. So that's the first way, the simplest way that these sample libraries work. The second way is with what's called a phrase builder, and most vocal sample libraries will have a phrase builder of some kind. Now this is the one in Voxos. You'll see here there are 20 sort of slots in this phrase builder, and you'll see here there are different words, different little phrases. Some of them are very, very short little phrases, others are longer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play long sustained phrases to start off with. Now you can go through to these individual slots and choose whatever phrases you want. So if you want to have a set of repeating phrases over and over again, you can do that, or you can just go with clicking this button and it'll just randomly populate these. So you get a little bit more variety than just a constant sort of like same tone all the time. Something like this. Turn it up a bit. So it gives that kind of, randomness, that variety to it. Let's just come up with something of our own. So I'm clearing this whole phrase, and let's come up with some little repetitive phrase. Do, mi, ne, for example. Just those three. Do, mi, ne, do, mi, ne, do, mi, ne, do, mi, ne, do. So again, those kind of phrases, you get a bit of variety, but you're not actually being able to put your own words together. I mean, you might be able to create some kind of words out of these little different phrases that they give you, but unlikely that you're going to create anything that means anything in English, for example. So let's have a look at another software package, another sample library. It works in a very similar way. It's called Chevenai. It's by Eduardo Tarilonte. He's a brilliant sample library designer. He comes up with some really imaginative and interesting sample libraries. They tend to be very genre specific, or very sort of specific to a time and a place, Egyptian, Arabic or Celtic or whatever. He's come up with a couple of vocal libraries. I'm going to show you this one. It works in a very, very similar way to what I've just shown you with that choir library, Voxos. Here is a it's not a phrase builder, but you can choose on the fly the phrases that are being sung. So it's a lady's voice. It's called The Voice of Elves. It sounds like this. It's a very beautiful sound. She's just singing "ah," and you can see it here on the screen. She's holding this large plate. And it's showing it's playing an R at the moment. Now these green keys here, these are the key switches. This allows me to switch between the different phrases that she can sing. I don't know what they are, let's just play them at random. This is a Ra. So some are very short, some are much, much longer. So again, just like Voxos, you could figure out what those key switches are, what those phrases are, and attempt to put together some kind of repetitive phrase, so it sounds like she's singing the same thing over and over again, or just vary it so that it just sounds a bit more interesting, like she's speaking in some elvish tongue. I think that's the idea, basically. So that's this particular one. I'm going to finish off showing you a third one. because neither of these, Voxos or Chevanai here, neither of these are in any way suitable for the piece of music that I want to put vocals to, which is far more upbeat, a bit more poppy. Here is a third sample library. It's by 0G. It requires the full version of Contact to work. And again, it's got vocal builders or phrase builders. And let's have a look at this one here. Builder. So it's a similar kind of principle to the Voxos phrase builder. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you've got 16 slots, and you can fill it with different phrases. And these are the phrases that we've got to hand here. Again, some little short ones, la, de, ta, etc., and then much longer ones. Now, by default, we've just got 3 in here, and they're longer ones. Let's see what those sound like. So you can hear it's a bit more of a sort of a modern vibe to this particular vocal. It's more suitable to modern music. Let's try shortening these and choose some short little phrases and see if we can play along to my music. Whatever that's going to sound like. I'll choose some of these shorter ones. What have we got? Let's go with the 4th one. Nah. Let's change the length. So now we've got short phrases. Let's try just playing along. I don't know how this is going to go. Let's try playing along to my track and see if I can come up with something with this particular sample library. Like that, nah. I'm gonna have to change that. Let's choose something else. What have I got? Right, let's try that. So I kind of like this process. It reminds me of a documentary I saw a very, very long time ago about Peter Gabriel. Back in the 80s, this documentary came out on TV, and it was basically showing his creative process. And what I saw in that documentary was how he put lyrics to music. He would have music, he'd written it, he's got drums going and synths and pianos and guitars and stuff like that, and it all sounds really, really cool. And he'd then kind of try and sing to it, but he didn't have any lyrics. He hadn't written any lyrics yet, so he'd sing gibberish, a bit like these sample libraries are singing gibberish. He would just be sort of creating sounds with his voice, and finding melodies to sing along with. And then he'd come back later on and he'd write real lyrics and sing those, as a final sort of dub mix. And that sort of gibberish that he would be singing into his microphone, he actually gave it a name. He called them Gabrielese, because it was a very fundamental part of his creative process.
At this point, I've only got outline ideas for lyrics, so I use odd sounds and noises from the voice, which I call Gabrielese. I think often that the naked sound of the voice is more emotive without lyrics, and I intend for there to be less lyrics on this album.
So these sample libraries, although they're not giving us sort of like real lyrics, they're kind of getting you in that sort of same frame of mind as Peter Gabriel's recording process of finding melodies and sounds with your voice which you can later add lyrics to. But wouldn't it be nice to have some software that would sing the words that you wanted to sing? And that's what I'm going to show you next. Right, so when it comes to software plugins that can sing the words that you wanted to sing, there really isn't very much choice. In fact, the only choice that I can find for the Windows platform at least is called Vocaloid, and it's published by the Yamaha Corporation. It's a Yamaha product. I think it's heavily protected by patents. Which is why there isn't any competition to it. I think there are some other alternatives to it, maybe that support Japanese language or to some degree English language. But obviously once you start to tell a piece of software to sing some words, it's got to understand those words. So it is very much a language-centric thing. But anyway, Vocaloid is what I've got here running on my PC. I think it's up to version 5 now. I've only got version 4 on my PC, but it's been around for a long time. I think it was 2004 that it was originally launched, so that's 17 years ago. So it's a real sort of like long in the tooth technology. Vocaloid itself isn't the best piece of technology. It's a shame that there aren't more competitors and other people coming up with products to compete with it. It's a bit of a shame that is the monopoly, because I really feel that it could be sort of like developed further, and my particular one here just doesn't work with high resolution displays. It messes up the display. It really is a pain in the butt. I should try and upgrade to version 5, but I will show it to you very, very briefly now. As I said, there isn't much choice. Vocaloid is it. Now, basically, Vocaloid is the engine, this sort of like the voice synthesizer engine, and you have to buy that, and it's licensed to you separately from any of the voices. And I showed you a 0G sample library just a minute ago. It's 0G that are actually coming out with these voices for Vocaloid. So you buy Vocaloid, the engine, from Yamaha on its own, and then you need to buy voice sound libraries, if you like, that run inside it. So I've got here in Cubase, I've chosen Vocaloid as the instrument here, instead of say Contact or whatever. And then what I can do is it actually inserts a menu system into Cubase for me. I don't know if it does that for other DAWs, but for Cubase I've got a menu option here where I can change the singer. I've got some sort of pitch setup mode going on there, and I can also open up an editor, and I'll show you that in a minute. So what we've got here is basically just normal MIDI notes, but there's some extra data there that the Vocaloid editor inserts inside the MIDI. So if I was to look at this section of MIDI notes here in the standard editor in Cubase, you'll see that they're just MIDI notes. You can see them here on the piano roll, and you can also see there's some text there that's showing what words to sing, and I'll show you that in Vocaloid's own editor. So I go to MIDI Vocaloid 4, open Vocaloid 4 editor there. And you get something that looks very, very similar to the standard Cubase piano roll editor. You can move these things around, you can set their lengths, just as you can in the standard editor, but you'll see there that this is where you enter words or parts of a word, so that you can actually tell it what you're singing or what you want it to sing. So if I don't play the MIDI here and I just press keys down, O is what it sings when it doesn't know what to sing. But once you've told it the words, so this first note here is got there written in it, and it understands there, understands the English spelling THERE. It knows that is a there. it's not going to sing it when I just tap on these. But if I were to play it, let's shorten this little segment down and just solo it.
There was a time when you were very young. There was a time when you were very young.
So I've got a lady's voice here. Let me just check what her name is. Change singer. There you go. So I've got 3 different vocal sets. Havana, Dana, and Dex. Dex is a dude. He's a bloke. The other 2 are ladies. So this is Havana that we're listening to at the moment.
There was a time when you were very young. There was a time when you were very young.
Very softly spoken voice. Then we've got Dana, which is what I had at the beginning.
There was a time when you were very young.
And then let's listen to Dex. It's going to be too high for Dex, I think. It's not going to sound good.
There was a time when you were very young. There was a...
Let's pitch it down. Let's give him a chance. Let's transpose it down an octave.
There was a time when you were very young.
So
There was a time when you were very young.
it's very synthesized. You know, it's not going to ever compete with those sample libraries I showed you before, which are real phrases of someone singing. This is kind of using samples, little fragments of samples, but then they're synthesized and they're pitched exactly, and it's very much a sort of a computer voice that you're hearing. Let me put it back to the original octave. Let's choose Dana Scully. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to play you now this segment all the way through. There's 2 verses and a chorus at the end, and it sounds like this.
There was a time when you were very young. You used to laugh a lot, smile a lot. But something happened in these recent years to make you cry. I used to think I could do anything. Invisible to all the BS. But something happened in these recent years to make me cry. Tell me just what is going on. What can we do? This world is what I signed up for. I think it's time for change.
So there you go. My computer is singing, and it is really quite cool. It sounds very basic here. Absolutely it does. There's a lot of little tweaking that you need to do to make it sound as realistic as possible. Well, it's never going to sound realistic, but as legible as possible. You know, there's certain little phrases and words there that it's not saying quite properly. You can kind of cheat. You can add different words in there to sort of like get it to create the right sounds. It might not be the exact right lyrics, but it doesn't matter as long as it sounds right. And of course, what I've got there has not been treated at all with any effects. You can apply effects to it just like you can any other vocal. You can stack up the different voices and the different sample sets from the different vocalists, create harmonies and stuff like that. There's an awful lot you can do with these synthesized voices, and for many songs that will be enough. But what I'm going to show you next is just a few different ways that you can use hardware instead of software to create vocals where you're not actually singing, but you will be needing to at least mouth the words to shape the words, although it won't be your voice that you're hearing. Right, so it's time to get some hardware to sing for us instead of software. And it's probably no surprise that I've got a vocoder in front of me here. This one is by Behringer. It's the VC340. It's a very faithful recreation of an analog vocoder back in the 80s, the Roland VP330. So it's an old design, if you like, and it's not going to be the most faithful recreation of the human voice. You can get much better, more faithful recreations of the human voice using digital technology these days, but it's got a certain charm to it, and that's why Behringer recreated the VP330 in this particular instrument here. So maybe it's probably worthwhile me just explaining to you what a vocoder is and how it works, in case you don't know. Now, the way that someone once described how a vocoder works to me was to actually talk about the human voice. If you think about how you speak or sing and how you form sounds that are words and phrases, it's actually a two-stage process. It all starts here in your voice box, your vocal cords in your throat. But your vocal cords are capable of just creating a very, very basic sound. If you were to just say ah, like ah, that's the sound of your vocal cords. It's very, very basic. You can change the pitch of that sound with your vocal cords, but that's as far as it goes. That's all your voice box can do. All those sort of like the words and the phrases that you create, those subtle changes in frequency are all to do with your mouth, your tongue, your lips and your teeth. It's those movements of everything in your mouth that's actually forming little sort of like peaks and troughs in frequency of that basic R sound that I just made, and that is what's forming all the words. So what a vocoder does is it analyzes your voice, it analyzes the different frequencies, the peaks and troughs in frequency by splitting up the frequencies into bands. A bit like a multi-band EQ, for example. So it splits up and analyzes different narrow frequencies. Now this particular vocoder, because it's an analog circuit, it's only got 10 frequency bands that it will analyze, which is not very much. But it analyzes those frequency bands, looks for those peaks and troughs, and applies them in real time using a set of 10 bandpass filters to a very basic sound, a bit like your vocal cords would produce, but a synthesizer sound. So this vocoder has got its own synthesizer sound built in, which you can just play using the keyboard or via MIDI, or you can pass any other sound into it and get it to modulate that sound via an external input. So the way I'm going to be using this vocoder here is I've actually got two audio inputs into the back of it. This audio input is actually going to be providing the synthesizer sound, so I'm not going to use the internal synth sound of this vocoder. I'm going to be trying out a few different ones on my Korg Kronos and see which ones I like. So I'm going to be passing the synth sound into the back of the vocoder via this cable, and this other cable is actually going to be providing my voice. I'm not going to be sitting here in front of it sort of singing or talking into the microphone. I've done all that already. I've attempted to sing the lyrics to my song. I've captured it in my DAW, and the reason I've done that is so that I can play it back over and over and over again, and I can try out different synth sounds and see which ones I like. So I'm almost treating this vocoder instrument here like a rack-mounted vocoder. I'm not going to be sitting in front of it, I'm not going to be playing the keys, and I'm not going to be singing into the microphone. I'll show you now at my DAW how I'm going to be manipulating and using the vocoder. Okay, so here we are in Cubase. Let's take a look at these two bottom rows that I've added here to my project. Now this first row here is, I've labelled it vocal MIDI. Now these are the MIDI notes that give the melody to my vocal. It's exact same MIDI notes that I supplied to Vocaloid to get it to sing for me. And I'm going to use those exact same notes to play the synth part that is going to go into the vocoder. So what I'm actually going to do with these MIDI notes is, rather than send them to the vocoder and play the vocoder's own synthesizer, I'm actually going to send it to my Korg Kronos in front of me here. You'll see here the MIDI out is set to Kronos. So I'm going to send it to my Kronos. It's going to then play those notes using whichever synth preset that I choose. And then the output from my Kronos is then going over to the vocoder and going into the carrier input signal. So it's this synth, the Kronos synth, that is going to be creating the synth sounds that the vocoder uses. So that's that row in the project. Now the second row, I've labelled it raw vocal. It is raw. It's me just singing into the microphone and just capturing me singing the words, the lyrics to this particular track. Now I've actually sung them a bit rather than just speak them. I mean, you can just speak into a vocoder because your voice doesn't give the vocoder any pitch information. So you can just sort of speak the words if you want to, but I think it's best and more natural if you actually try and sing the words, because lower frequency sounds are going to sound different. Your voice is going to sort of sing differently when it's pitched low as opposed to when it's pitched high. So I have kind of sung it. I'll play it to you now, just a little snippet of it, as much as you can stand. I'm just going to divert the output to the regular stereo outs, and then let's play it. There was a time when you were very young. You used to laugh a lot, smile a lot. See, I told you I couldn't sing. But something happened in these recent years to make you cry. Beautiful, Tim, beautiful. Okay, so that is my raw audio. Now what I'm going to do, rather than play it so that we can hear it, I'm going to divert it to an output that's going to go over to the vocoder. So it's going to go over to the modulator audio input, so a bit like the microphone, but an external input into the vocoder. So now that leaves me to just sit here, just play it, and choose different synth sounds on the Kronos and see what they sound like. So I'm starting off with a simple saw lead sound, and let's see what the vocoder comes up with. There was a time when you were very young. You used to laugh a lot, smile a lot. But something happened in these recent years to make you cry. So I'll try a few different sounds, see what they sound like. Invincible to all the tears. But something happened in these recent years to make me cry. Tell me just what is going on. What can we do? This world ain't what I signed up for. I think it's time for change. There was a time when you were very young. You used to laugh a lot, smile a lot. But something happened in these recent years to make you cry. I used to think I could do anything, invincible to all the tears. But something happened in these recent years to make me cry. Just what is going on? What can we do? This will ain't what I signed up for. I think it's time for change. So you can see that that changing that synth sound has a big impact on the effect that you get, but still there is there's a certain vocoder quality that's to every sound. It's definitely a vocoder that you're hearing. It's definitely like a kind of a vintage analog vocoder sound that you're hearing, and you never quite get away from that. I mean, these different synth sounds that I was choosing on my Kronos here are incredibly different to one another, but there's a consistency in the output from the vocoder, and that's just the way it works. That's the charm to it, basically. So what I've done is I've basically gone through and tried loads of different presets and picked out a couple that I like, and I'll play you those now, with the backing track, just that little segment of it, so you can hear basically what it sounds like. There you go. Okay, so analog vocoders are all very well, they've got a certain charm to them, a certain sound, but if you want to recreate your voice as accurately as possible, you're going to need to turn to digital technology like I kind of alluded to before. This particular keyboard I've got here is a Roland VP550. It's a real Roland synth this time, not a remake. It is actually the successor to the VP330, but it took Roland 27 years to come out with it, which is quite bizarre. It's all digital technology. I think it came out in 2006, 2007 maybe. It is very similar to the VP330 in as much as it is a vocoder, but it also has accompaniment capabilities to it. It's got some ensemble effects, strings and choir kind of sounds, that kind of thing. But as well as sort of like having basic waveforms, it also has samples inside it. So it's got some interesting sampling technology in here for shifting those samples and pitching them correctly in a very sort of natural way. That technology is also in the Roland V-Synth GT, and some other high-end keyboards that Roland has produced. So we're just going to concentrate on the vocoder aspects of this VP550, and just to kick off, we'll just listen to the inbuilt sounds that it has for playing a vocoder. I'm just going to play on my DAW, which is going to send the MIDI into the synth to trigger the internal sound engine, and it's also going to be sending my beautiful vocals, as before, via external input into the synth as well.
There was a time when you were very young. You used to laugh a lot, smile a lot. But something happened in these recent years to make you cry.
Let's try the second vocoder sound.
Tell me just what is going on. What can we do? This world ain't what I signed up for. I think it's time for change.
So crystal clear sound. It's got a very high resolution vocoder in here. But as well as these vocoder sounds, we've got 4 inbuilt sounds which are sample based, and as well as that we can also put our own external synth sound into the VP550 like we could with the Behringer vocoder. So let's listen to these sampled sounds. The top 3 are really sort of accompaniments. They're multiple singers singing along. So this one is called Classic.
There was a time when you were very young. You used to laugh a lot, smile a lot.
And he's male plus female.
I used to think I could do anything, invincible to all it is. But something happened in these recent years to make me cry.
And gospel.
Tell me just what is going on. What can we do? This world ain't what I signed up for. I think it's time for change. There was a time when you were very young. You used to laugh a lot, smile a lot. But something happened in these recent years to make you cry.
I think out of all of them, pop is most suitable to a lead vocal, but it is still very slightly kind of synthesized. It sounds still a little bit like a vocoder. It's a bit synthetic, it's not natural, but I think it sounds okay for a lead vocal.
There was a time when you were very young. You used to laugh a lot, smile a lot. But something happened in these recent years that make you cry. I used to think I could do anything.
So while I've got the vocoder behind me, the VP550, and it's a very accurate and high quality vocoder, I thought to myself, well, rather than using the samples that are inside it, why don't I try and create my own samples? Let's try sampling my own voice. I mean, it should be straightforward. All I've got to do is just sing like ah, and make sure it's in pitch, maybe pick out a few notes and sing those notes, and then I can create a sampled instrument. I could use contacts on my PC, for example, but what I'm actually going to do is use my Waldorf Iridium that's sitting on my desk right in front of me here. It's great with samples and sample manipulation and looping samples. So I'm going to record some samples, put them into my Iridium, create a little instrument that is my voice, and then I'm going to use that to send a carrier signal to my vocoder and see if I can really quite accurately recreate my voice, but hopefully playing in tune. So that's the idea. Let's see what happens. Recording my vocals. What could possibly go wrong? Madness. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I thought that it would be straightforward. I mean, it stands to reason if I'm rubbish at singing, I'm going to be rubbish at holding a note and keeping it in tune without any fluctuations for a few seconds. I think I really need to go back and redo some of those samples because they sound terrible. But anyway, I've put them into my Iridium here. So now I've got this amazing instrument. Yeah. Okay, so I've got it into my instrument, but there are tuning issues. And it's really important that the instrument that's the synth, that's the carrier signal, is in tune, because it's the thing that's going to go through the vocoder and it's going to provide the tune to the result that you get out of it. So unfortunately, this has been a bit of a crap exercise, but I did think about auto-tuning the samples, but then I thought, well, if I'm going to auto-tune the samples, then I might as well auto-tune just singing. And I'm not covering auto-tuning in this video because I really think that if you can't sing, then auto-tuning is not the answer. But maybe it is. Maybe auto-tuning these days is so good that you can get away with it. But anyway, we're not going to cover this in the video. I'm just going to play you now what this wonderful instrument sounds like when I push it through the vocoder, along with my raw vocal that's going to form the words and the lyrics. So it sounds like this. go. Well, I mean, it's better than if I was to actually sing it myself. It's more in tune than if I was going to sing it myself. It's got some artifacts in there. It certainly sounds like a vocoder, and the EQ's all over the place. I need to play around a lot with it and try and get it to sound a little bit more natural. But you know, as an exercise of trying this, it's been worthwhile. But I would never use that. But I suppose then what you could do is you could use a plug-in software library, sample library, where you've got a proper singer that can sing properly, going ah, and if you've got some of those samples that you can then use and then put into the vocoder, then you've got a lot more opportunities in terms of being able to create, lyrics and vocal tracks with other people's voice sounds rather than attempting to do it with your own. So that's something that may be worth having a go at. Right, so I realise this video is getting quite long, as my videos tend to do so. There was one other technique that I was going to talk about, but I'm not really experienced with it. And it involves a piece of rubber tubing that you shove down your throat. Not quite down your throat, you shove it in your mouth. Talkboxes have been around for a very, very long time. They precede vocoders. My first recollection of a talkbox was Peter Frampton playing Show Me the Way, really classic rock song. If you don't know it, check it out. It's a really great song. He uses the talkbox to great effect. So what is a talkbox? Well, a talkbox is, it works in a similar kind of way to a vocoder, in as much as you substitute your own voice with another sound. But you end up using your mouth, your tongue, your lips, your teeth, etc. to shape that sound. So rather than singing or attempting to sing or talking with your own voice, you fire and blast sound waves from some other noise via a tube into your mouth, and then by using your mouth to shape, as you would normally sing, some lyrics, you get a different kind of sound coming out, not your voice, but the pitched sound that you play down the tube. Now what's at the other end of the tube needs to be basically a speaker, a preamp and a speaker inside a soundproof box, where the only way that the sound can come out of that box is down the tube. What I've got on the end of this tube is this little stomp box here. It's a little talk box. It's designed for guitarists, basically. It's got a preamp in it, it's got a gain control. You can really get a lot of drive and distortion out of this if you want to. The sound comes out of here, fits into the tube, and that's what you shove in your mouth. There's an awful lot of spittle and spit and dribble involved in doing this. I was actually watching a Peter Frampton, a fairly recent interview of him where he actually demos this, and he's got a very good technique. He has sort of the tube sort of like aimed downwards, so when he puts it in his mouth it doesn't fill with spit as he's using it. And he does have a very good technique, because you've got to, with this in your mouth, you've got to close your lips and form sounds as you normally would without something shoved in your throat. So there is a technique to it, and what I realise is that it's not something I'm going to be instantly able to show to you. I need to take the time out to actually practice and get good at it, and I don't have that time. So I'm not going to try it. I'm not going to cover myself in spit either, but it is an option if you want to have a go at it. This little pedal here, I picked it up for like £150 second hand. I don't know what they go for new. Or if you're into DIY, you could create your own little talk box. So talk box is another way to go. So that's really it. There's a variety of techniques that I've shown you here. My favourites in terms of the results certainly is Vocaloid. I like Vocaloid. I like the results that I've got from it, or kind of like the results I've got from it. The female voices sound an awful lot better than the male voices. The male voices sound so bland and without any kind of emotion whatsoever. The female voices do sound better, but they're not going to suit everything. Also, the VP550 playing in that pop mode. That came up with this kind of a passable sort of like sound that I might use. But you know, vocoders, I do like vocoders. If you're playing electronic music, then vocoders tend to fit in with that kind of genre. So a vocoder is a good way to go, and obviously there are very, very good software vocoders as well as hardware vocoders. So that's it, that's all I've got. As I said at the beginning, if you're using different techniques that I haven't covered here in this video, I'd love to hear from you, so please leave your comments in the section below. Until the next one, as always, thank you very, very much for watching.
Recent years, they make me cry.
version that Genesis never wanted to be made public.